provide us some education on kind of the basics of LVAD use, and I'm glad to see that you've brought lots of sample and hands-on devices, because that's what we had asked for, is the opportunity to really be able to look at and hold and get familiar with these devices. I do want to thank also Ray Vipperman and Doug Powell. They're here from Alamance CMS. They're also kind of getting some education here, and hopefully we can translate some of this training to provider training in Alamance as well. And, Doug is our training officer, and Ray is the director, my boss. So, all right, thank you.
Well, thank y'all for inviting us and having us out here. My name is Molly Reese. I've been a VAD coordinator and a heart transplant coordinator in the past. Sarah Herbert, same past experience. So we're glad to be here, and we just kind of want to go over LVADs, and it's very informal. If we talk about something and you have more questions or don't understand, just speak up, okay? That's the best way I think to learn. Okay, and I think Sarah got this PowerPoint together for you guys, so I think we'll start there. Basically, what is an LVAD? It's a left ventricular assist device that's a mechanical pump that it's used to support heart function and blood flow in people with advanced heart failure. So we see this in patients who are usually stage 4 heart failure. They can be 3B, 4, somewhere in there. EF is less than 20-25%. Those are the requirements for an LVAD. People have to be evaluated very intensely, just like for a heart transplant for this advanced heart failure, because they have to have a strong enough right side of the heart to support this left side. Because the left side, now that when they have a pump in, is giving them full flow, whereas before they had very little flow. So we have to remind patients, this just supports the left side of the heart. They still have intrinsic heart rhythms themselves, so don't ever think this pump does it all, because it doesn't.
Well, I think one of these is running. It's making like a little bit of.
Yeah, this one.
Can I move it so it just kind of makes it.
Oh, sure.
Makes it hard.
You think it's this one?
I don't know. Just make it a little harder for me.
Okay.
I don't have the best hearing.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Is that better?
Is it this one?
Yeah, it's a motor. It's like a
Can I
fake.
just move it outside for a minute?
Sure.
Or you can put it in that case.
Here, yes.
Sorry, doesn't that bother you?
Is he riding the truck with y'all?
No, he's not.
I got a dog whistle we could try out.
Sounds like
I'm very perceptive. Very perceptive.
So basically, y'all, this pump takes blood from the left ventricle and helps pump it to the rest of the body. And what they do in the OR is they core out the apex of the left ventricle. So they cut a hole in it about that big around. The inflow cannula for the HeartMate 2, we didn't, for this cannula then is placed inside the heart and it's attached with a sewing ring. The larger pump, the HeartMate 2, which is, we've got one to show you, they have to make a pocket because it's a larger pump. They attach an outflow graft to the ascending aorta. So blood is still coming into the left ventricle around the valve, but this is doing the majority of the work. Does it replace the heart? No. The heart is still pumping and firing like normal, so if you hook them up to your monitor, you're still going to have the same EKG. It doesn't affect the electrical part of the heart. This is just the plumbing part. The power source is either AC power or battery power. And when you guys are transporting, they're always going to be on battery power. They have power modules or mobile power units at home that when they go to sleep, they can attach to those. But anytime they're going to transfer or go out of the house, they're going to be on batteries. And we'll go over that in a minute.
Before you keep, real quick, I know it doesn't affect the electrical part of the heart, but does it give any kind of interference when you're trying to do EKGs?
It can, yeah. 12-lead EKG, expect to see a lot of artifact. And it's just that electrical stuff that's coming through. Our EKG techs at the hospital, they get so frustrated because they'll move them like a million places, and I'm like, you're never going to get a perfect EKG. The patients, like we talked about, they have to have an EF less than 25%, advanced heart failure. That can no longer be managed by medications alone. Class 3-4 heart failure. A dilated cardiomyopathy can be ischemic or non-ischemic. And then the causes for some of these: diabetes, hypertension, chemo, pregnancy, congenital, viral, and heart attack. Indications for VAD. When I first started doing this, a pump was only used as bridge to transplant because they were big and they only lasted about a year, year and a half. So They're like, you have to be listed for a heart transplant or heading that way before you're a candidate for LVAD. With this pump right here, the HeartMate 2, when it came out, gosh, when was that? Probably 2010?
Yeah.
When it came out and was FDA approved, it was the first pump that ever had FDA approval for something called DT, or destination therapy. So that means people who aren't candidates for a heart transplant or don't want a heart transplant, instead of them just dying within the next 6 months, they have an option for this. If they meet the requirements and if they can handle this, then they can get this until end of life. And hopefully this allows them to live a better lifestyle. They're not coming in the emergency room every week, getting IV Lasix, and they're not having to sit up in bed to breathe. That's the point of that. So we still have patients that are bridge to transplant, and we have patients that are destination therapy, and the two intermingle. You know, we've had patients that we put it in that say, I want to get a heart transplant down the road. I just can't live long enough to get a heart. So people get this as a bridge. You know, we have several patients with VADs who've been on the wait list at Duke now for 3-4 years. That's how long people are waiting for hearts. If they didn't have the LVAD, they would be dead 3-4 years ago. So that's what bridges them to transplant. But then sometimes you have people who get it for destination therapy and they're like, this is it, I don't want to go to transplant, this is it. Then they get to feeling better, they feel healthier, and they're like, you know, maybe I will hang in there for a heart transplant. Because average life for a person with an LVAD, I think 5-year survival rate is 50%.
With the two, I think.
With the two, and I'm not sure about the newer pumps.
Not that far.
And average heart transplant patient now is up to 12 or 13 years. Although a lot of them we've had 20 years, you know, because the immunos have gotten so much better. So shorter lifespan with an LVAD, longer lifespan with the transplant. The parts and pieces. HeartMate 2, like I said, the first pump that was approved for destination therapy, because the company was Thortec, now it's Abbott, but when it first came out, they said this pump will last 10 years. Not a year and a half, but 10 years. And actually, I think the longest living patient with this now is right at 8 or 9 years.
We lost Ken, he was 8.
We share care with some patients at Duke, and recently a patient had had his for 8 years and just passed. So yeah, it does give them a lot more life than the older pumps that just literally wore out in about a year, year and a half. And those were the kind that you saw on TV you could hand pump. So those were true, that was for real. People would come in the emergency room hand pumping themselves when their pump stopped. These you can't, because these are built to last longer. And then the HeartMate 3, this is the HeartMate 3. These loops are just on there so we can demonstrate. But the HeartMate 3 is much smaller, and it is now approved only for bridge to transplant, but they're looking to get approval for destination therapy within the next month or two, really. And then the last is Heartwear. We've only put in 3 of these at Moses Cone. It's a smaller pump. It was the first one to get FDA approval for bridge to transplant and destination therapy. So I'll let you guys pass that around. Our surgeons wanted the smaller pumps for 2 reasons. They didn't have to make such a huge pocket here, so there were less problems after surgery. Also, these pumps are saying they have less pump thrombus than the old HeartMate 2. Internally implanted, you have the inflow cannula, you have the pump itself, you have the outflow graft, and then this drive line, like all this is implanted. This drive line is tunneled, sometimes here, and all we'll see is this piece right here coming out. This part is made to let tissue grow around it, so that's the big thing. We try to get tissue ingrowth, so this completely closes up, decreases chance of infection, and then all we see coming out is this part of the drive line. External components. With the HeartMate devices, you have controllers. They look very similar. The HeartMate 2 has the gray and the blue, and the HeartMate 3 has the black or blue. I don't know what color that is, but that's the only difference. They work exactly the same. And then the HeartMate 3 is this controller. I mean the HVAD, I'm sorry. Have y'all seen any patients with LVADs? Have you seen both the HVAD and the HeartMate?
I've only seen the HeartMate.
Okay.
Wow.
System monitor is usually only in the hospital. We are limited to how many monitors we have. The HeartMate monitors cost around $10,000 a piece. So we're up to 5 monitors, and sometimes we don't have enough when we have a busy inpatient service with our LVADs. Power sources are power module or batteries and clips. And then the drive line we talked about, and then the accessories we'll go over. So HeartMate 2 controller, old EPC, there's probably a few patients around that you might see that. The patient we were talking about that recently passed, he was the last one that we had personally that used this controller. He would not upgrade to the new one. He was set in his ways. He liked that one, and that's what he stuck with. The HeartMate 3 and then the HVAC controller. So, battery power allows patients to be mobile. 2 batteries are connected, provides 6 to 12 hours of care depending on the type of equipment they have, and it can be carried several different ways. Sometimes you'll see ladies carrying this little shoulder bag. Men usually like to use the waist pack with their batteries. Some people, we have some young kids who like to use the backpack. And then this is one of the HVAD, goes around their waist and they have everything right there that they can see. This is really becoming popular with our men. It's concealed weapon t-shirts. I love it. So they'll put their batteries in there, and then they'll put their controller in there, and then they'll wear a shirt, like a button-up shirt over it. Nobody even knows they have an LVAD. And these are the accessories for the HeartMate. Belt attachment, battery holster, they have shower bags. When they heal, they can go home and start taking showers. Travel bag, the consolidated bag, neck strap, and holster vest. So if you pick patients up, they could be wearing this equipment in any one of those ways or in their own special way. We had one guy who got a leather Harley-Davidson vest, and he had it tailored so he could wear his stuff in it. So you'll see it worn all different ways. The modes of power that are tethered, some patients have this at home. It's the old power module. Some patients now, they started using this mobile power unit probably within the last year, so it's much smaller. But these are the things they have usually on their bedside table or their living room, and they're plugged into that, and they're plugged into AC power. They don't have to worry about their batteries going dead. But if you're ever there to pick them up, then you know you have to transfer them to batteries. And you don't need to bring any of that equipment with you. And patient assessment. Remember, these patients usually will not have a palpable pulse, but you can get a heart rate if you put a pulse ox most of the time. Sometimes that's not accurate. If they have low pulsatility, you may or may not be able to get that, but you probably won't feel a pulse. So you have to go back to basics and just look at them. Are they pink? Are they warm, dry, mentating? They know what they're talking about. If they don't, then you know perfusion is a problem. You can listen to the device, and with the HeartMate 2, you hear a that's what it sounds like. If you hear a that's a problem. There's probably a clot in that pump, and you can actually hear the difference. The HeartMate 3, it's kind of a with a little hiccup.
It sounds like what you don't want the HeartMate
Yeah,
2 to
it
sound like.
does. Because they built in this
Fake pulse.
yeah, fake pulse. So it kind of washes that pump out every so many seconds. The hardware, I think their fake pulse is once every 60 seconds. So you'll hear a little hiccup in that one, but not as often.
And we can turn that one on and off.
Yeah.
So the HVAC, we can go in there, and if we don't want to set that LVAD cycle on for the washout, we can turn it off.
That's just for clot prevention.
It is.
Yes.
And they didn't have that in the HeartMate 2. And of course, one of the problems with the HeartMate 2 was pump thrombus. So when they went back to trying to figure out how do we make this better, this is what they've come up with.
And the HeartMate 3 has almost 0% thrombus.
Right.
So from everything they've done through all their research studies, I mean, it's like stellar. Like they don't have.
And that's why our surgeons and cardiologists don't want to do the HeartMate 2 anymore. They want to do the HeartMate 3. So we have put in, how many? 3s now?
No, we have 6.
6.
With Kyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think total number of VADs we've implanted at Cone are close to,
56.
close to 60.
Do these patients have to be on any anticoagulation?
Yeah, they're on, usually they're on Coumadin and aspirin. Yeah. So listen to the device, and remember VADs only fix the mechanical portion. The electrical is still important. If you go and pick somebody up and you hook them up to the monitor, and I've had this happen, been paged to the ED, patients coming in, I go down there, and they literally roll in on the cot, and they're sitting up, and they're like, I just don't feel very good, and they're in V-fib. They're talking to me, and they say, I just don't feel very good, I'm a little bit weak. And they can be awake and talking to you in V-fib. Now, for how long, I don't know, because remember, the right side has to have enough blood flow back to it that it can keep filling that pump. But VT they don't even really feel that sometimes. Some people have VT 180, and alarm goes off, you run in the room, they're eating breakfast, and they're looking at, why are y'all coming in here? They don't even feel that. So this pump keeps running and keeps perfusing, whereas you and I would probably pass out or have to sit down or lay down or die. They can live. So what we found is you almost have to treat it like VT with a pulse or without a pulse, you know. If they're awake and alert, most of the time they'll start amiobolus and give that a chance. If they're still in it, then they usually sedate and then cardiovert them out of it.
So if we encounter something like that, that's where we would be calling y'all
Yeah.
and cardiology.
Yeah, and then we'd get a hold of our docs and say, what do you want us to do? And they would probably say monitor them as long as they're awake and talking and mentating. They may want to get you to start some amio, but they probably want you just to transport in. Now, if that changed at any time, you'd have to intercede. Don't you think?
Yeah.
So in the truck, if we were to get somebody from Alamance going to Duke, and they do go into VTAC,
If they're asymptomatic.
if they're asymptomatic, just let it ride then and not give the amiobolus, or?
I would contact the hospital, the docs, and see if they want you to start it or not. But as long as they're asymptomatic, they probably won't want you shocking them unless they do get
Well,
sick.
I'm not talking about shocking, I'm talking about just giving the amioter on bolus.
I think you'd need we do amio at the hospital at Moses Cone.
Yeah.
The
Is
reason
that
I'm
part-
is that
asking
your
is,
protocol
depending
if they
on where
want
we
VT?
are in the trip, we may not, it can take 15 minutes to get a doctor on the phone.
So is that part of your protocol? If they're in VT, you start
Yeah, we
amio?
could give amioter on, yeah.
Yeah, but we didn't really consider VT in bad patients.
Yeah, that's the reason I'm
It's
asking.
still though, it's treated the same way. Amio is usually first drug of choice when they come to the ED. It's what they usually give. They'll give them a bolus and then start the drip.
It kind of makes sense, they're awake and talking and they feel okay, but you notice it, then you have time to maybe call the receiving physician.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is it could take 15 minutes for somebody to get on the line,
So
especially
what-
what to do.
My answer to you would be, I would follow my protocol. If your protocol is to give an amio bolus, yes. Remember, this is a patient with a VAD, not a VAD with a patient, so you're gonna treat that patient pretty much like you would any other patient.
Yeah, and if that's our patient too, it's much easier because you're gonna page the VAD pager, and we're basically a direct link. You don't have to go through cardiology and whatever, because if that's our VAD and we're sending them to Duke for whatever reason, then, we're gonna come back really quick. Yeah, give him 150 of IV amio if he's asymptomatic, hold tight till you can get to Duke, and, but if something changes, it would be a lot easier for y'all if that was our patient, just because, it's gonna be a lot quicker than you trying to call your docs and get orders.
Yeah, because the last VAD patient I took, they didn't have a number in the ED for the VAD team or anything. It was just we were taking from point A to point B like any other patient.
You know what we should have brought?
Was that from Moses?
Yeah, it was a Moses Conley ED going to Duke.
I bet it was a Duke patient you were taking to.
Probably,
yeah.
We should have brought those things.
Badge buddies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll run and get them at break maybe and bring them. Because we've got some badge buddies that we made up that if you want to stick it on your thing, it actually has the VAD number on there. So you'd always have our pager number.
And I got paged last night at 1 a.m. for a Duke patient. So, it happens, so even if, that were to happen, that's okay.
Blood pressures, this can get tricky with bad patients. We used to say only a Doppler blood pressure was accurate, and we've learned over time that's not true. Some patients have pulsatility, so I don't know if y'all have Dopplers in the trucks or not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what we recommend is place the cuff on there, get your gel, listen for whatever sound you can find. It may be a pulsatil sound, it may just be something like a very light. Find that, pump the cuff up 120, 140, 160, let it off slowly. The first noise you hear, that's what we're going to document. We don't know yet if that's our MAP or if it's a modified systolic. We used to treat every patient like that was a MAP. So we were giving them medicines to bring that down, and in reality, it was more of a systolic number. So our patient was more tired, and they were like, gosh, I had no energy, and we were doing that to them because we didn't know any better. So over the time, the VAD community has learned that it could be a true MAP or it could be a modified systolic. Goal MAP 65 to 85, you'll see a very narrow pulse pressure. After you do that, I put the automatic cuff on and see what it is. If you've got a pressure of 85 with your Doppler, then you may get a pressure on the automatic cuff 100 over 70 with a mean of 80, 85. Then that's truly a MAP. But if you get an automatic cuff pressure that's 80 over 60 with a mean of 50, then what you got was a modified systolic. They're truly hypotensive. Now, if you put an automatic cuff on and it doesn't correlate at all with that number you got, then I count that as my MAP. I just disregard the automatic cuff. I'm not even going to try to use that anymore, and I'm just going to have to attune it with a Doppler.
So the Doppler pressure is the most reliable.
It can be, but unless you
kind of have to put the two together,
differentiate between is that a MAP or a systolic, you can be in trouble because you could say, oh, I got a MAP of 85 patient. This is great, but that may be a systolic, and they're truly getting hypotensive.
So what we treat our nurses at the hospital, we teach them to, like, when they first come in at the beginning of their shift, to do both, to Doppler and then do a cuff. And however it correlates, if that's their MAP or their modified systolic, then that's what they can do for the rest of their shift.
Use your automatic cuff. If it correlates, you don't have to keep doing that Doppler because it's tough in the back of a. I know I used to be an EMT many years ago, but it's tough to hear anything back there. So if it correlates with your automatic cuff, then just use your automatic cuff. And we do that. We take patients to procedures and surgery where they get meds and kind of drop that out. So yeah, just have to figure out what it is you're looking at. If at any time you started having problems picking up with that automatic cuff, maybe they're dropping, then you may have to revert back to a Doppler. O2 sat may or may not be accurate, depends on the pulsatility of the patient. The emergency black bag, most of them look like this, and inside there the patients are taught to put a set of extra fully charged batteries, a set of extra battery clips, and they actually have a backup controller in there as well. So grab that if you're transporting anybody that needs to come to the hospital with them.
So the larger box, the home controller.
That power module you don't have to bring.
What if patient say goes to Annie Penn and they don't bring that controller, do they still have access or a way to plug into AC power then?
No, we're going to get them to Moses Cone.
But I mean, some of these might take.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes a transfer takes 6-8 hours. Unfortunately.
But remember, a pair of batteries will last, with the HeartMate 2, 10 to 12 hours. With the HeartMate 3, it's lower RPMs. They'll last up to 16 to 18 hours a pair. So with the extra set of batteries and the batteries they're on, you're looking at around 24 hours of longer power.
Is there any harm in taking their home controller with them?
Yeah,
I think
don't
with
take
EMS,
it.
just leave it.
Yeah. Now, I don't know what Duke says, but we say don't take it.
I think in general, the treat change is take it all, right?
Here's the problem, when you bring it to the hospital, we become liable. So if it gets knocked over, gets lost, whatever, guess what? We're paying that price to replace it. And if you walk in the hospital with it, all these regulations say you cannot use that piece of equipment until biomed comes and checks that out. So it really creates more of a hassle than not. So if you have to stop by Annie Penn to stabilize or whatever, you're gonna be there short term. They're going to get in touch with us, the VAD pager. We're going to get in touch with our doc, and they're going to be on the phone with them and say, transport, get them here.
they'll go to the ED at home before, it won't matter if there's a bed.
Yeah. When they go to the ED at Cone, our rapid response nurses, when we're not there, we call them, they bring a cart down with the power module and all that equipment. We're there, we take it down.
Yeah, the other problem with that is that power module has an internal battery in it. And if it's not plugged up for, say, some of them, I mean, an hour, that internal battery will die. And once you plug it in, you're done.
And you're gonna hear an annoying beep that you cannot stop
Yeah.
from beeping. So you just, for any other purpose, you don't wanna hear that annoying beep. Cause you literally have to get a screwdriver, take the back off and pop the battery loose to get it to hush.
So we've had patients that took that to travel, like if they were going camping or something, and then they call on the way back and, I
Hear a
can't get
beep.
this to stop. And I'm like, do you have a screwdriver in the car? Maybe you could stop and pull over at a hardware store and buy one, and I'll walk you through it. So you wanna leave that at home, like that's not something you
Yeah.
wanna bring.
But you wanna bring their emergency bag and of course.
Their batteries, yeah.
And-
Fresh pair batteries that they connect to, and we're gonna let y'all practice getting your hands on that. For the most part, patients or caregivers will be there to help with all the equipment. If by chance you respond and the patient's out and there's nobody there, we want you to feel comfortable putting them on batteries. They have a battery charger at home that they keep 4 batteries in, charged, and then they have actually another set of 4 batteries in the backup box somewhere. So they have 8 batteries at home. The HVAD, they go home with 6 batteries. All right, packing the patient up. Okay to use straps across the chest, but not across the cables and controller, and be careful with scissors. We haven't had this happen here, but I know we've gone to conferences around the country where patients roll in the ED and they start cutting a trauma patient and they have cut the drop line. So,
I read a case report about that actually, where they did that at the bedside. I think the physician was able to splice the wires together to get the pump working.
well, it was a temporary fix because then they probably had to either go to the ED and OR, put a new pump in.
Oh,
or
I'm sure.
Get the text from the company out to rebuild that. So yeah, the controller, I'm telling y'all, this drive line is the Achilles heel. As you can see right here, it can flop, and no, I'm not kidding you. I can be so careful, and I'm in there with the patient, taking them to CT, and I think I have everything, and you feel a little something and you catch it. It's just a lot to keep up with, but just be careful with that if you will.
Like, how solidly secured are these drive lines? Are they like somehow internally
They're
like
internal.
sutured in, or
So
how
this
do they?
part, remember they grow in, so this part will literally have complete tissue ingrowth, hopefully.
Okay.
But if this gets tugged on and that opens, it's the #1 source of infection for these VADs. So this is truly one of the biggest problems with it. It's an opening, an unnatural opening into the body. If you get an infection started, it can track up this drive line. It can actually get seated in the pump. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. Probably 95% of these LVAD patients have ICDs. So if they do go into an arrhythmia, they may be getting shocked. Some of them have their therapy off because they've been shocked so much they're like, I'm not living with that on. But most of them have therapy on. But yeah, and then it can get seated in that ICD pocket, so it's a mess when that infection takes over. So patient management, assess patient's airway just as you would your usual protocol. Auscultate heart sounds to see what the device sounds like. Assess device for any alarms. Intervene appropriately based on type of alarm and EMS guide. Usually you want to start a large bore IV. Assess your blood pressures, normal MAP, like we talked about. Actually, we've dropped that 90 to 85 now. And then bring all this extra equipment with you. And when y'all get up here, we'll show you how you can assess some alarms on these controllers. I think we talked about this, yeah. And then device assessment. On these, like I said, both of these are pretty much the same. You have 3 soft keys. You can punch any one of these and you're not going to hurt anything, you're not going to change anything. If you happen to press and hold this, it's going to tell you I've got a full set of batteries. It's going to give you that. If you press and hold it for longer than that, then what you're going to hear is it's doing a self-assessment. So if you ever accidentally press and hold that and you start hearing this, don't freak out. We've had nurses do that. But it actually tells you it's doing a self-test. you have a display button, so you push this, it's gonna tell you my pump speed is 93, 9400, my flow is 7.5, my PI is 1.3, my power is 7.1, and my backup battery is charged. The biggest thing that I look for is this right here. If you see those little green lights, that means the pump is running, so you're good. Now, no matter if there's an alarm going off or not, I look for that. If that's on there, I'm like, okay, we're good. Now, we may need to look into it pretty quickly if it's a red alarm. If it's a yellow wrench alarm, and we won't get into all these, because what we want y'all to do is call us, pages, if you have any issues with this, but yellow wrench doesn't mean the pump at all. It's something to do with ancillary equipment. So that one is, you can silence that for 4 hours. That's not an immediate jeopardy. If you have a red battery, what happens is this is so smart, it warns patients because it knows how we human beings are. When you get down to 15 minutes on your batteries, it'll alarm a yellow little battery and it's telling you, it'll start beeping, it says replace your power. You got 15 minutes. If you don't replace it, and we've had patients, they're in the basement, they're working on a project, the batteries are on the second floor, and they're like, I'm just going to finish this. Then they keep going, and the next one is a red battery. It's a louder, more annoying alarm, and it's saying, you've only got 5 minutes left on your batteries. Doofus, you need to get up there and get new batteries. Believe it or not, patients will say, oh, I just want to finish this one little thing. Then if it goes to where your batteries are completely dead, we're going to say we have no battery power.
Oh.
You would see this red heart alarm, and it's telling you you have no power from either one of these power cords. You're not receiving any power here, and it's telling you I'm running now on your backup battery. There's a little backup battery in the back of these controllers on the HeartMate 2 and the HeartMate 3 that will run the pump for about 15 minutes. So it gives them a little extra time. But it'll even count up. It says you've been on it 27 seconds. You need to get on power. So hopefully they're going to either go upstairs, get some new batteries, or put themselves on the power module. And as soon as they do, the alarm clears. Our pump has not stopped. But if we wanted to look and see, if patient, you go to the house and the patient says, I think that thing alarmed. You can actually push the display and alarm key at the same time, and it'll let you scroll back for the last 6 events, and it says external power disconnect. So they ran out of power, basically. You can scroll through those alarms by toggling this little display button, and it'll let you see what all they've had. But we'll do a little bit more of that when y'all are up here, and you can see it a little better.
If you push the buttons on there, can you
You can't
do
hurt
any
it.
pump programming
No.
or hurting it, or there's no switch
No.
to turn it off,
No,
right? So,
no.
okay.
They actually made it where patients couldn't go home and fiddle with it because they figured patients would. The only way we can make any change, and the only thing we can really change on this is the speed, is with that big system monitor that we have in the hospital. Now, another thing, if a patient gets confused and they want to take this drive line out, remember this is the only connection to the inside pump to the outside world. It's such an important connection, it's got a double lock. They can't accidentally pull it out. Even if they open the lock, that way they still can't. They literally have to depress the button and pull this out. But if that should happen, you can see you've got a red heart alarm, your green little circle of life is gone, and it's saying connect drive line. The pump is stopped. So if this ever becomes dislodged, the pump stops. The problem with pump stoppage in these things, it allows retrograde flow back through that pump. There's no valves or anything in there to protect that from happening. So if the pump's off 10, 15 minutes, would we restart that pump? I don't know. I'd have to ask my doc, because you could have a clot in there, you restart the pump, and guess what? You just push that clot and strike. So the key that we try to teach our patients, never, ever stop this pump. It gets complicated.
Okay, my next slide.
Pump parameters, we'll go over that. What you might see for, did we put that in the wrong place?
I don't know. Where are we?
That's it.
Here?
If you guys are picking patients up in the community, here's some of the potential complications that you could see. Pump thrombus and stoppage, driveline malfunction, inflow, outflow, obstruction. And all those would be red heart alarms probably, if it's pump stopped. LV suction event, infection, hemolysis. Tamponade is usually early on, and we see that in the hospital. Could be stroke, could be end organ dysfunction. Mainly what you'll see, GI bleeding with these guys. They just tend to bleed with these pumps. So I think that's probably our biggest readmission.
Yeah, and that's been a lot of our transfers to Duke has either been for GI bleeds that our LVAD guys could not fix and they needed the double balloon, which they only do at Duke. So we've transferred a lot of our patients down there, very stable VADs. Otherwise, they're going down there. The other transfers we've had that were more critical were because they had pump thrombus that needed to be fixed.
And right side failure. I've had some patients who get pretty sick when their RV kind of gives out on them, and they can get pretty bad. Emergency management, still airway breathing, evaluate the pump. CPR, controversial topic since it can damage. If you do chest, pretty aggressive chest compressions, what they worry about is dislodging the inflow or the outflow cannula. And if you do that, they're going to bleed out before you can get them to the OR. Every hospital has different protocols, and I know most is common right now is no chest compressions. Follow all ACLS protocol except chest compressions. They can be paced, they can be anything, cardioverted, defibrillated. You don't have to worry about any equipment. They've got now these controllers are grounded. The early pumps, you'd have to disconnect everything, defibrillate, then connect everything back, but they've improved grounding technology in these so you don't have to worry about that. You just defibrillate as you're breathing in the patient. And then EMS field guide, y'all. Have y'all looked at this? This is available on the internet. You can pull it up, and it's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger because it goes over every pump that they have. The total hearts, some of the pumps that we don't see or do, but they actually have these cool guidelines that kind of gives you a synopsis of what the HeartMate 2 is, what are some of the problems, and some of the troubleshooting things. There's the HeartMate 3, and then the one thing different with the HeartMate 3, y'all, that we didn't see with the HeartMate 2, it has this modular cable. I'm not sure I'm a fan of it yet, but this has to stay connected. So if you got there, pump was stopped, as you're checking connections, check your drive line, make sure this is connected properly, make sure they have a power source. This is just an extra little step. And then there's the hardware. Transporting critical VAD patients, like Sarah was talking about, if they're stable, you guys can transport, but if they're critical, one of the VAD coordinators would go along with you guys.
Okay.
And that's really the ones where they have some pump stoppages, because it's not, I don't expect anybody to know what to do in that case. And it can be a minute by minute thing with that, so we'd want to go with you with that. Just because it took me years to learn some of the nuances with this equipment, and don't expect y'all to know that. And I probably wouldn't be able to do any good either, but I want to be there just in case if we could. What happens with pump stoppages a lot of times is this drive line it's got 6 little copper wires in there. It takes 3 to run the pump. There's 3 that are redundant. But if there is a short to shield, one of those wires goes through the exterior part of this, then this pump will run on a non-grounded source of power, but it won't run on a grounded source. So if they're on their power module and they page me and they're saying, Molly, this thing is just every once in a while, it's just beeping and alarming and I don't know what's going on. Well, once you investigate, go on your batteries. Go on the batteries and the pump runs, then it's a pretty good indication you've got a damaged lead. Now, if it's out here, good. We get them in, we do x-rays, we send that to the clinical engineers at Abbott. They look at it. If they assess it and they say we can repair that, they actually have to fly 2 of those guys out here. We admit the patient in ICU, and they have to rebuild this lead. It takes them about 2 hours to do it. And FDA requires there's 2 of them. I guess in case one falls out, there's a backup person. I was like, what is that? They're like, it's just required. I was like, okay. So in order to try to not have so many of those repairs, that's why they made this modular cable. So if the patient has lead damage up here, then we can just take this out, and get a new piece right here. That's all fine and good unless there is a problem in here. And that's where those patients, if our surgeons didn't happen to be in town or whatever the case, if there is a connection problem in here, then they have to have a pump exchange. You know, they got to go to the OR and get a pump exchange. Most of the time, I've seen it with kids, like 17-year-old that got this, he grew 5 inches and gained 60 pounds. It actually pulled apart right here. Kind of like ICD leads, you know, when you put them in young kids and they grow, that's the problem. Or people who gain a lot of weight, you'll see damage on the interior part of that drop line. And EMS resources at mylvad.com, it has that EMS guide, but you can also just type in Google EMS guide and it'll come up. Thortec, hardware, and mainly us, y'all. If you have any questions, just page us. One of us has that pager on 24/7. And like I said, I'm gonna run back and get some of those badge buddies and bring over, so if y'all need them. And a lot of Duke patients do come to our hospital because they live closer. And I think that may be the patients y'all get called to pick up and take back to Duke. Are they usually pretty stable?
Yeah, the ones we've transported back, I was surprised to hear that one of you guys would go with us, because everybody we transport, I have anyway, has been completely right.
If they're stable, then we're not going to. But if it's problematic, we don't want to leave you hanging, and we'll go. And then, you know, another thing, guys, we get very close to our patients here. We're not like the big Duke that has hundreds of people out in the community. I think right now we have 37 patients. So they're all like family to us.
What about the one that moves to Martinsville? The last one I picked up, I think he had moved to Martinsville. Been up there like 2 weeks. They put it in here, and he went into the ER up there and chest pain, and they had never messed with him, so they're freaking out up there. I mean, he was stable. He just had some asymptomatic chest pain.
I don't know who that would
Me
be.
neither. We have patients that live in South Boston. We have a lady that lives in Lumberton, and they drive to clinic. And
So at 3 o'clock in the morning, if we have an unstable one that far away, is somebody gonna meet us there?
No, we will not meet you there, but we will be in Moses Cone Hospital and transport with you if you need to go somewhere else. Yeah, we're not gonna meet you in the community. And I don't know who that is. Do you remember a name of that person?
Couldn't tell you. He moved up there like 2 weeks after he had it placed.
That wasn't our patient. I wonder, there's some VA patients that have moved around in that area that we kind of help out with, but no, that wasn't ours.
My neighbor across the street has one.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I knew you'd ask about his name, but I'm terrible. I just can't remember it right this minute. He just spent several weeks in the hospital with renal failures on dialysis now. So.
Craig Murphy.
Murphy.
He's our first one to actually have to go to dialysis.
Just remember we're recording this.
You're gonna have to edit those names out. Sorry. Yeah, he's a nice guy.
Well, he moved in to help take care of his sister.
I know.
Now, the guy's got ill bad with dialysis. He's helping take care of his sister.
And I think, you know, one problem is, y'all, when we get late referrals, and he was a late referral, meaning that he had been in stage for quite a while. And, you know, part of that is that evaluation process. If people wait too long, or we don't get that referral and we don't meet them, our docs don't meet them earlier in the process, they've already got kidney damage, permanent kidney, liver, lung, whatever damage. Putting a heart pump in won't fix all of that. If you catch them on the cusp and you're like, okay, if we can perfuse that kidney, we're hoping it's going to turn around and come back. That's one of the hardest things for the docs to figure out. And he came, like I said, late to the party. But he's a sweetheart. And they're doing very well with his dialysis. He had to go train at the dialysis center.
Oh, yeah. He looked like he's walking his little
Yes.
19-year-old dog. 19-year-old dog, that's rare.
What kind of dog is
It's
it?
like a little Shih Tzu.
Oh. And he was like a boat captain. You know, he's been all over the world. Oh, if you ever talk to him, he'll tell you tons of stories. He was like he owned a fishing boat, and he's been all over. Interesting background. Well, any other questions, guys? Has this been helpful, not helpful? Okay,
Does
good.
everybody who needs one of these get one, or are there ever financial problems?
Financial is one of the big things that we have to work on, because you don't want to put one of these in and then break somebody. You know, you don't want them to lose their home and everything else just to pay for the medical treatment required to take care of this. So that is a big piece of the evaluation. Do they need assistance? Do they need to get on Medicaid? Do they need insurance approval, so insurance company doesn't stick them with the bill? You know, we try to do as much as we can to facilitate that so they're not financially ruined. But I will say I've known patients, even so, it's a tough road. I mean, they can get into trouble financially. But our hospital has a great heart failure fund, so we help a lot of patients out with paying bills, paying mortgages, you know, things like that. We try not to do it routinely, but if they get in a bind, we have very generous people at Moses Cone that contribute money to that fund, help them with medications, things like that. We have a dedicated social worker who, she's so smart, she can find resources where I would have never thought to look, you know. Yeah.
So there are some people that can't get
I
one.
can't
because
say
of
that
the
we've ever turned anybody down financial reasons, because we try to make that work. Where people get turned down is like they're too late, you know, their kidneys are too far gone. Or another big thing is their social atmosphere. They have to have somebody. When I first started learning about this, I had a doc say, you've got to have two people that love you enough they can put their life on hold for 3 months to get you through this process. And not all of us have that. You know, we may have loved ones, they work full time, they've got families, they've got whatever, and you don't have anybody that can take off work and say, okay, I'm gonna look after you. When patients first go home, they have to have a 24/7 caregiver for at least the first 2 weeks, and longer if they're elderly or more debilitated, and maybe more. They can't drive for 6 weeks, so they have to have somebody to bring them back and forth to clinic visits, and those are weekly visits at first, and then we get out to every 2 weeks and then every 3 weeks. So very close monitoring with these patients. So a lot of times they just don't have the social support. And if it's somebody who has a history of not taking their meds, you know, not showing up to doctor's appointments, kind of doing their own thing, then this will not be a good outcome if you put it in a patient like that. So the medical side, the social side, and financial side, those are kind of all in a piece together. And the same evaluation we do for these are the same evaluation people get for heart transplants, because it kind of goes hand in hand. I think we've had now four patients or 5 that have gone to transplant. So we partner with Duke, we work with CMC and UNC. So patients, once they go through this process, then if they need to go to transplant, we send them to one of those hospitals. Right now, CMC has their LVAD transplant program on hold. They had some issues with some intraoperative things going on. So they're still doing transplants there, but not VAD to transplant. They're getting some new staff and some extra training on board. So right now, all of our patients, we're pretty much sending to Duke. We just sent one of our ladies to UNC just because of insurance purposes. But Dr. Van Trike, you know, he trained all those docs right now at Duke, the surgeons. So they have very close communication with them. And Dr. Ben Simone trained at Duke, so they all know those guys. And they've been good to our patients.
Mm-hmm.
And how often do the batteries have to be switched out for new ones?
10 to 12 hours
Not
of
me,
care.
like the life of the battery.
Oh, 36 months or 360 uses, whichever comes first.
And they don't develop any kind of memory in them, they can just plug them in to charge whenever they want.
Yeah, there's a little cycle that they want to, about every 70 uses, this thing is so smart, it'll tell them you need to recalibrate me. So you actually drain it and then fully charge, kind of like we used to do our old cell phones and things like that to clear that. Yeah.
Defibrillator batteries.
Dr. Qualley, I was gonna tell you, Luke just shared with me the other day, I'm telling him, if you need a controller sent to you, because I know you're worried about it getting to the hospital, they flew one to Lumberton, he works with Air Care. They flew not the patient, the controller.
It's a battery charger.
Yeah.
The battery charger.
Something happened with their power during all the storms, and the battery charger was bad.
That's what I was thinking, like,
Occasionally,
we can't get patients in and out due to bad weather and stuff, and if we leave that controller
It's
at
a
home.
UNC patient, I think, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, you know, one of our guys, he's in his 30s, and he is, We love him, but he kind of does his own thing, and he drove a truck, and he got home, and he went back to driving truck long distance, and it was a Friday. I'd gotten off work, was taking my dog to the vet, actually, and I got paged. It's his girlfriend saying, his batteries are going dead, and I'm like, well, where's his backup batteries? He forgot it. So when he got out of his truck and got in the big semi-truck that morning, he thought he had brought his black bag with backup batteries and controller. Well, guess what? It was still in the truck on the lot. So he is in West Virginia, y'all, in the middle of nowhere, and his batteries are beeping. He's getting low on power. So that was I said, you got to call 911 and get the ambulance to come get you, because you don't even know where you are, and they've got to get you to a local hospital, which they did. And the local hospital, of course, they didn't have any VAD equipment, so we're calling surrounding areas, trying to get him airlifted. The flight wasn't available at that time. Ground EMS was going to take too long to get him to Centera or wherever we were trying to get him to. And so we started calling VAD coordinators in that area. They actually called, it was a physician who had an LVAD. He was a interventional radiologist, retired. He lived 2 blocks away. They put a call to him. He brings the guy batteries. He walks in the back door of the emergency room and gave him the batteries.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Call the patient.
Yeah, that's what we did, because we were like, man. So we just started calling the coordinators, and they just started networking to their patients, and we happened to find somebody. If that guy hadn't walked in, the staff there, they were in tears. They were like, we're going to watch him die. I was like,
I have a question on how he has a CDL to drive a truck with an LVAD in.
he doesn't anymore. That was kind of
Yes,
left
Popo.
over from pre-VAD, that he kind of slipped in the back door, and we were like, no.
Is that the 3 doing the stutter right here?
Yes.
That's that artificial pulse that they built in there to try to wash that pump.
Yeah, okay. I just saw it was, I didn't know if it was like air in there, but I
No,
noticed it
you
looked like the different.
You can feel it and you can hear it, like I said, when you listen. So it's
I did take a patient from Too Hard to Duke, I don't know, it's probably last year, and she was going to have, I think she already had 2, heartmate 2, but she was going through 3.
That was Lakita. I was there that night.
Right, so because of bleeding, so it causes, that's what I was,
she had a thrombus.
a thrombus in the pump.
In the pump. And she
She didn't act like it.
She actually heard that herself. I saw her in clinic this week, and I was listening, and she was like, I can hear that. And I'm like, most patients cannot hear that pump. She said, I can hear it. She said, that's how I knew that pump had a clot in it. She said, because I could hear it, it sounded different. And it was actually such a big clot, it was kind of doing a little jerk.
So there's no way to medically resolve that clot?
If it's a small clot, and they try to catch it early, they'll admit them. They used to put them on IV heparin and found that didn't help a lot, so now they put them on LVAD, and they see if they can reduce the LDH, which is just this lab test we do. Increased hemolysis will raise the LDH, so that's how we screen for it. And if that starts coming down and they have a negative ramp echo, then we're good. If it's not coming down, they have a positive ramp echo, then it's like,
I think what I was going to ask you, because I'd read some information, what was
It's not
A little bit of heat to it, I'm guessing. Your body probably serves like a
The
radiator,
batteries
just
changed
bits
out the
now.
same way.
part of it.
In the HVAC, but
No.
okay.
Patient was basically
He has
passed
the
out
3.
on
That has a heartmate.
LVAD.
So he has that one right over
Treatment
there.
pressure, and they were like all this stuff.
Here's the
I said,
HVAD.
you're not doing it.
So
Is
this
it worn off? Or you?
I was like,
I
I guess that's how it's made. So, yeah, like when it grows on that.
so they got battery power.
That's what it comes out.
I said, but you don't do anything with that. I said, because even doing a
Just
control
pulls that out.
Just like a magazine.
Oh, you got to. Oh, hey.
and that's what
Click.
Okay, so you don't give us.
No, so they put this little boot thing over it to protect it, but you don't get your hands on that, but you kind of twist and pull.
So this is where the batteries would change out to. Is this the battery?
Yeah, they're a lot smaller than the HeartMate. Yeah, and it's, you kind of feel it click in there.
Has pins in there?
Yeah, clicks. And then this port right here is just for data.
How many did you say that of these you have out there in the community?
We've implanted 3, 1 died, so we have 2 of them. Yeah. One of them lives in Reedsville, and the other one lives in Greensboro. No, Summerfield area.
And this is gonna be, I guess you just disconnect the batteries.
Normally, would you choose them both? Are they both gonna be kind of dead at the same time, or does one just kind of flip over?
So the difference in this pump is that these batteries drain individually, whereas the HeartMate ones drain together. This one drains one all together, and all one, and then it'll switch over to this one. But it won't be until they're both dead. Yeah. And the other thing about this pump that Molly didn't mention is that they have to always have one battery hooked to them. So when they're on AC power into the wall, they have to have a battery, because this controller doesn't have an internal battery in it. So if you disconnect both power sources, your pump's gonna stop. There's
That was a good idea.
I don't know. We say the same
Same
thing.
person that created that.
Exactly. That's why this is not our favorite pump, because we just feel like there's a lot of peripheral things about the equipment that we
Is
don't
it
like.
physician driven on which one gets put in, or is it according to the maybe anatomy of the patient on which one would be?
And anatomy, and then our surgeons really wanted to do this pump because it's smaller, and that HeartMate 3 is not approved for destination therapy, and this pump is. So our little bitty ladies that come in and are in heart failure, they want that are destination therapy. You know, they don't have to make that big pocket.
So if they're a bridge, you're gonna get one of those other ones more likely, not this.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we've kind of found a little way around, and so we've actually been getting all of our patients approved for HeartMate 3, even though it's not approved for destination therapy. We've kind of found a way out. And so the last 3 we put in have been HeartMate 3s. So, yeah.
So if you had this in your heart, you had to carry all of this.
Not this piece. This is just the motor. So you would have this and your 2 batteries, and then you drive one.
Oh, got your necklace now.
I might have broke it. I've already broke this thing one time. Does it say logo?
How was called?
Oh, see, that would be a thrombus.
Is it a link in there?
Yeah. That's what you see if you had a clot. But I'll have to remember that for next time when I'm teaching staff nurses. Just suck your necklace in there. But yeah, you'd see high watts. They have thrombus because it's requiring more energy to exert through there. So.
And this one here comes with a spare, they have a spare controller and spare batteries.
Yep, same thing. Mm-hmm. Yep, and they have their adapter. We showed you that power module. Their adapter looks like a computer charger. That's what it looks like. That's their AC power for the wall.
Oh, okay.
But they've got to be plugged in one port into this and one port into a battery. Because if their power goes off during the night, then, it will switch over to that battery. And they'll still start alarming because they're going to lose a power source. So if their power goes off during the night, then it's going to switch over to that battery that took 2. And then after about 20 seconds, they're going to start beeping. Just a little beep that will let them know, hey, you only have one power source on here. I need another power source. Of course, if our power went off at our house, we know because we sleep with fans. So, so that's just saying, I need another power. I need another power source.
So do you tell the patient to notify their power company?
Yeah, we do. When they leave the hospital before discharge, we send a letter to EMS, and most of the EMS is trained. And we send it, we have different connectors like throughout, like for Guilford County, we send a letter over to Chris Wilson, letting them know we've got another patient coming to your county. And then we send a letter to whoever their power company is, Duke Energy, Energy United, whatever. And then Duke Power actually sends them like a form to fill out. And we fill it out, our doc signs it, we fax it back to Duke Power, and they put them on the emergency list. And before the hurricane, Duke Power actually called a lot of those people, which I thought was comforting, that they were kind of checking in to see, what your plan was.
I guess their neighbors really love them.
Yeah. I know, right?
Get your power back on first.
So, we just write them a letter that says they have life-saving equipment.
All of a sudden, they start feeling bad, they look down and
The
their
paper
gas
that they
too.
send kind of like
usually
levels
either
that are out, like
hypo,
life-saving, and
or
then,
maybe an arrhythmia.
there's like
AFib,
2 other levels that
VT,
are out. You think, I
AFib.
guess, that people
Something's
just need
just not getting
to,
that flow
other
to
things
the
like meds or whatever.
So that was a
They're all
real
not-
easy thing I learned. Now, the heartmate 3 is
Yes.
different in that the
That's like the
PI
second
is
one.
not as important. It's gonna fluctuate, it runs lower, and what we look at more in that pump is the flow.
What's this stand?
The flow is an estimated cardiac output, it's not a true cardiac output, but it does kind of give us an idea of what that pump is.
What does PA stand for?
Pulsatility index. So it's kind of like how much of this is the heart's own pulsatility, the patient's own pulsatility. Usually an increased PI with the heartmate 2 means the patient's heart's doing more. If you need to ramp up the speed, you'll ramp the speed up and you'll see that PI come down because now the pump's doing more. The heartmate 3, it's a little bit different. It's a new pump and we're still kind of learning the nuances about that. It's a lot more sensitive because of the flow that they have in there.
Well, what's about like the annual cost of care
I
for
don't
someone
know.
for having
Yeah.
Now, as far as switching out batteries, there's no order to do it, just as long as you don't do both at the same time.
Right. And even if you accidentally do disconnect both, that's what I teach patients. You know, you're going to get an alarm, but remember, your pump's running because you've got that backup battery.
Can you run independently with just one battery?
You can. Now, it'll beep every so often to tell you, I'm looking for another power source. And some people, like, when they're changing power sources, like, they'll come over here and they're going to say, I'm going to go on my power module. Some people get really nervous when they hear that beep. You know, they're going to say, oh gosh. So they will silence it just so they don't get nervous, especially women. Men, a lot of times, they're saying, I want to hear that beep and I want to make sure I've got it connected. So every one of them has a little bit different. And most of the time, y'all, they're not going to let you touch their equipment. They come to clinic now and they're like, no, I'll do that, Molly. You know, they get very territorial over this. If they're on batteries and you want to switch,
I feel that.
I had a patient, y'all, his wife would come to clinic. She was a nervous Nelly, and she said, I'm just going to kill him. And I'm like, what's going on? He'd get behind her, and then he would do that.
That's
She
Billy
would
Young
have
right
like
there.
a heart attack, and I'm like, oh my God.
That's Billy Young right there. He'd probably start fainting or something, you know, act like he's fainting. That's Billy.
Can you bring me a sandwich?
That's
And
right.
like, if you want to switch batteries, you just pop this out, get a fresh, and then do the same thing there. So you don't have to disconnect it, but you've got that battery release. You can just pop out and switch over batteries.
And is there any reason why you would want, I mean, like if we go somewhere and the staff there is unfamiliar with it, and we wanted to do a self-test just to make sure, it's continuing to...
It won't hurt anything if you want to do
So
that.
it's still running in the background, it doesn't
Yeah.
slow down
No,
or anything?
doesn't do
Okay.
anything to it. And in fact, you know, we might ask you to do a self-test. Like if you have, y'all, the fancier these controllers get, the more issues they have. It's kind of like when you have a car with roll-up windows. That was the old EPC. It just worked. Now these are kind of like you have the automatic windows and you have the sensors. There's sensors and things in here. So sometimes it's just a sensor issue and you may have a yellow wrench. So we might say, just do a self-test on that and let's see if it's going to pass. Now, we were talking about controller changeouts. Patients and families have to learn how to do this. They have to perform it before they're allowed to leave the hospital. The only time that we'd have patients or you guys do a controller changeout if there was just absolutely no other option. Okay? And in order to do that, you would have a backup controller. Let me just do this one, guys.
Hopefully at that point, when
I was telling her, I was like, you know, it's, in the back of the ambulance, when you're really kind of triage what to do, you just, basically, I've got it where you just treat the symptoms. Because there's nothing you can do to control it.
Right.
I mean, and it's not a benign procedure, because I was reading, I was telling her, I read the study where there were several deaths from controller swaps, you know, early on.
Well, you know what happened there? These new controllers have this backup battery, and the company really wasn't aware of it. When it gets down to the last month that the battery is supposedly good, at midnight this thing started alarming, and they didn't know it would do that. So it woke patients up from a dead sleep, and they're like, oh gosh, something's wrong. And so then they're fumbling around doing a controller change-out that didn't need to be changed out, and they had a couple of deaths.
Yeah.
So that was a big FDA thing that we all had to teach our patients about. But if a patient's going along, this is them, and they said, okay, we need to do a controller change. Do we have another, I was just gonna show them real quick, they were asking. Do we have another Department 2 controller?
So
But
like,
they have to
we
learn-
talk to you, the VAD coordinator says, you need to do an emergency controller change out?
Here you go.
Bro, what do you got to lose?
Exactly.
That's right.
I mean, that's
That's true.
where we're at.
That's
I mean,
true.
you're,
I hope
Right.
we'd be at that.
Just make sure you document really, really well.
and who it is that told you
Names.
this.
I need names.
This is Molly Jones. I don't know. No, okay, so you're gonna get the backup controller out of the black bag. The first thing you're gonna do is connect it to a power source. And the patients, like I say, we teach them to do this, but only if we're on the phone and talking to them to prevent those unnecessary controller changeouts like those two deaths happened. And that, luckily, that wasn't our patients, but it did happen.
So you're connecting to their extra batteries now?
Yeah,
Okay.
extra batteries now. So what you see on the controller is it's saying charging. You're like, oh my gosh, should it be charging? No, it's just topping off that backup battery. The pump is not running by that. It's running by the batteries that you connected here. So what we usually do when we do a controller change out, we have the patient either lie down or sit down. We actually try to get them to do it themselves when we do elective controller change outs. You're going to open that, and you're going to, as quickly as you can, take the power out of here and place the perk lead here. So you're going to say, you may feel, you're going to hear alarms. Y'all, everything's going to start alarming, but you're going to out, in, close, pump it over. It takes a minute to get those RPMs up, so don't panic. When you saw the green light, let me show you. So out, that little black lines up with that little black, jiggle. Close it, because if you didn't get it in right, it won't let you close it. Flip it over, and I've got green lights. I'm going to disregard that. The sweat's dripping in my armpits, but I'm going to disregard that because I see my green lights on, and it's going to take a few seconds. So that's as long as that pumps off. If you power up the backup and then out in as quickly as you can.
Alright, so when we used, the last one that I picked up was
If you want to practice that, go ahead.
Cone's ED. They were hooked to, I guess, Cone's external power source. And we had to put batteries in there to go somewhere else. So
Right.
when you change out, when you disconnect,
We don't have one here though.
I know, we should have.
so it's just a matter of changing one battery out
At a time.
At a time.
You know, it's got that 20-foot patient cable, and it's got a white lead and a black lead, and it's just unscrew white
Whichever
or black,
color to
whichever one you want, and then you just put it in a battery charger.
And one at a time because it's still
Battery
running
clips.
off the automatic.